this soup looked pretty good. But the fruit, let me find my space here. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, and my least favorite, long-suffering.
All right, Broom.
If I can give you a thought with this word long-suffering, I want to leave you with don't go back. Anybody ever tried to do something and succeeded? Anybody ever tried to do something and did a good job at it? Tried to do something great and it went just all right.
All right.
Tried to do something new and you liked it just fine. But you got one of those siblings that try to boss you around all the time. Just because they're the oldest, they got to tell you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, where to do it, and why you should be doing it their way. Yours ain't never good enough. The kind of sibling think they know it all. The kind of sibling think they your mama. The kind of sibling think they your dad. The kind of sibling think their way is the best way and their stuff don't stink. The kind of sibling that think their way is the only way to do something. You love them and you hate them. You like them and dislike them. You stand them and can't stand them. You want to fuss them out and cuss them out. Nevertheless, that's your sibling, and you got to find a way to deal with it. Such, touch yourself and say such, is the time of our text. For Paul has preached the gospel to some people in Galatia. The kind of gospel that sets the captive free, the kind of gospel that empowers the oppressed, the kind of gospel that reaches beyond racial barriers, the kind of gospel that reaches beyond economic status, the kind of gospel that moves beyond social status, the kind of gospel that went across gender lines, the kind of gospel that proclaims justice for all of God's children, the kind of gospel where being Baptist don't matter, being Kojic don't matter, being AME, CME, Episcopalian, Presbyterian, Protestant, or Catholic don't matter. The kind of gospel that regulates minds, heals body, and saves souls. But some Jewish brothers and sisters says it got to go our way. They come in and begin to preach and teach salvation in Christ, but not without the circumcision.
All right.
Not only did they preach that one must be circumcised to be in a relationship with Christ, but there's the possibility that some have adhered to their message. Hence the writing of this letter from Paul to the Galatians reminded the people of his call by God, his commission by God, and his care for them from God. Hence he sets out to remind them that all that matters in this gospel is the love of Christ, the life of Christ, and the legacy of Christ. The love that Christ showed us with his passion, the life of everlasting equality and empowerment that he lived here on earth, and the legacy of grace and truth left by his Spirit. In spite of the gospel that was once preached to the Galatians, in spite of accepting this gospel, living this gospel, and experiencing this gospel, here it is, some were getting ready to turn from freedom in Christ to slavery and bondage under the law. If I can put a stop sign right there, I'd ask you, isn't it amazing how you can experience freedom, experience happiness, joy, and peace in your life, and God delivers you out of some stuff, but somehow, some way, you find yourself going right back to the same thing that caused you heartache, that caused you headache, and that caused you some pain and sorrow, some things that caused you to get right back locked up mentally, spiritually, in every aspect of your life. Paul reminds them to not go back. Don't turn back to bondage under the law. In fact, he says in Galatians chapter 5 and 1, it was for freedom that Christ sets us free. Therefore, keep standing firm and do not be subject to the yoke of slavery again. And if you go back to the law, make sure you got to obey the whole law, which is, for the record, impossible to do. That's why Christ had to come. But he says in so many words, if you're going to stay the course with Christ, you're going to have to be long suffering. It's good to have some peace. It's good to have some joy. It's good to have some love, but you got to be long suffering. Long suffering with those who came to take you back to things of old. Long suffering with those who cause division in the church. Long suffering with those who try to discredit the gospel. Long suffering with those who are self-serving. Long suffering with those who oppose you and your love for Christ. If I could bring it home, I'd say you got to be long suffering with your ex. You got to be long suffering with your boss. You got to be long suffering with your spouse. You got to be long suffering with your children. You got to be long suffering with your baby mama and your baby daddy. Long suffering with that messy co-worker. Long suffering with that church member who gets on your rabid nerves. Long suffering with your brothers and your sisters in Christ. This word long suffering means to be patient. It means to bear with, to be long tempered, to bear along. It is both a noun and a verb. A noun because it is a fruit of the Spirit. It is one of the subjects of the Spirit of God, but it is a verb because it displays the very ongoing and present heart of God. Long suffering is in the genetic makeup of the Spirit that makes it a noun, but it's also what the Spirit is acting out at this very moment that makes it a verb. Vine says long suffering is the quality of self-restraint in the face of provocation, which does not hastily retaliate or promptly punish. It is the opposite of anger and is associated with mercy and is used of God. I'll repeat that. Vine says long suffering is the quality of self-restraint in the face of provocation, which does not hastily retaliate or promptly punishes. It is the opposite of anger and is associated with mercy and used by God. In other words, Paul says, I need you to be long-suffering to others because God was once long-suffering to you. And if we're being honest, if I was to open up some of our closets and expose some of our stuff, I'd say we ought to be thankful God is still long-suffering. Some of us have gone back to some bad relationships, but thank God for long-suffering. Some of us ain't what we used to be, but we ain't where we ought to be. Thank God for long-suffering. Some of us ain't where we been, but we ain't where God wants us to, but thank God for long-suffering. Some of us have gone back to some bad habits and some old ways, but thank God for long-suffering. I want to encourage us today to not go back. Stick with it and run the race that God has been given or that has been given to you. Keep pushing towards the mark of the high calling in Christ. And when you feel like giving up, when you feel like you've suffered long enough, look in the pantry of your past and pull out some sugar to remind you that God has been sweet to you. Pull out some salt to remind you that God has seasoned your life with grace and mercy. Pull out some honey to remind you that he's sweeter than the honey on a honeycomb. You ought to pour out some Skittles to remind you of all the junk you've done. God still kept you. You ought to pour out some butter to remind you that God is cooking up something good in your life. You ought to pour out some bread and thank God for being the bread of life in your life. You ought to look in your closet and pull out an extension cord and remind yourself that God could have laid down the law on you. God could have whooped you for most of the things you've done, but he still showed you some grace and some mercy. Some of you know about the stanchion cord. The old folks call it the stanchion cord. When you've done something wrong, suspension from school, they say, go get the stanchion cord. And they lay down the law on you, but God could have laid down the law on some of us, but instead he didn't say, go get the stanchion cord. He said, go get my son. And when he said, go get my son, he said, you've suffered long enough. You've been through sin long enough. You've tried to do it yourself long enough. Only one person gonna get you out. The stanchion cord, which represents the law, it got you here, but it didn't save you. You need my son. Why do we need his son? Because we need to be reminded that we're covered by the blood. We need to be reminded that it's the blood that covers us. How do we know it's the blood that covers us? Because on a Friday called Good, on a hill called Calvary, when they struck the crown of thorns on his head, when they whipped him all night long, when they put the nails in his hand and his feet, when they speared him in the side, I'm reminded of how long he suffered. I'm reminded of how long he went without thirst. I'm reminded of how long he suffered to the point where he thought God had forsaken him. But early Sunday morning, God said, you suffered long enough. God said, Jesus Christ, you suffered all day Friday. You went in the grave all day Saturday. But early Sunday morning, you suffered long enough. What does that mean for us, Morningview? Some of you been sick long enough. Some of you been experiencing bad luck long enough. Some of you been in your situation long enough. You have suffered long. You have endured long. You have endured hardships long. You have endured death in your family long. You have endured pain and suffering long enough. But God says, come out the grave. You suffered long enough. You've endured your hardships. You've endured your sickness. Now it's healing time. Now it's reconciliation time. Now it's time to be truly covered by the blood. If you're going to be covered by the blood, you got to understand by his stripes you are healed. You got to understand if you're covered by the blood, you can be addiction free. You can be what kind of free is causing you to be bound up. You can be free in God. Don't go back. Don't give up. Don't turn back. Keep long suffering, and God will say you suffer long enough. God bless you.